A tale. Let it be told. On a Tuesday that wore the face of Monday's cousin, the sky over a Manfro motor yard held its breath. A small blue hatchback rolled in, trailing a sound like a goat coughing, embarrassed, insistent. The driver, a woman with a school badge stuck to her blouse by habit and hope, eased to a stop near a shack where signs promised blessings they could not pronounce. Engine overhaul. Computer diagnostics. Miracles while you wait. Before she could open her door fully, a man in oily overalls arrived with a smile that could sell rust. "Sister," he said, peering into the bonnet without opening it. "You came on time. Your engine is finished. Only my hands can negotiate with its ancestors." He called himself Master and let the lie wear the overalls. The talking drum, disguised as a cracked hubcap, leaned against a tire and whispered, "Watch the invoice. Watch the woman who counts school fees with the same fingers that count bolts. Watch the shadow that thinks it is a man's reputation." Last market day, the Guild of Artisans had named a new master technician for the district. Adwoa Madam Spanner Tando, a woman whose palms kept the memory of torque and whose ears could hear a failing alternator the way healers hear fevers. The guild elders poured libation and tied a strip of red cloth around a wrench, the way chiefs tie it around a stool. She kept the wrench in a pocket and her title in silence. She preferred the sound of a correctly torqued bolt to the noise of introduction. Now in the yard, a mechanic rehearsed fraud. He did not know that Truth was parking 3 bays away, sliding out of a pickup with a tool bag that contained both a multimeter and a proverb. "Oh, if this tale idles in your own yard, let the drum carry it farther." Like you to keep the engine of justice running, share with someone who's been overcharged for a noise, and comment with your city plus time. So the next part finds your street before the next fake diagnosis does. The scam, the screws, and the invoice that couldn't count. Listener, bring your ears, set them down like clean rags. The single mom's name was Miriam Sika, mother to Kwaku, age 7, soccer philosopher, and Afia, age 4, owner of all crayons. She drove a 2008 Bluebird Seita with a cracked taillight and the patience of a widow. On the dashboard, a sticker read, "We reach by repairs, not by prayers. Do both." She had come for a noise, a belt squeal at startup, a rough idle, a battery light that flickered the way some men love. She had put aside part of rent to face it. Poverty loves interest. It charges twice for delays. The mechanic in oily overalls, real name, Kojo Nutsuga. Street name, Dr. Torquay. Stroked the bonnet like an evangelist promising oceans to a cup. "Engine is knocking," he announced, cocking his head as if listening to ghosts. He had not turned the key. He did not need evidence when confidence could do the paperwork. "Knocking?" Miriam repeated, trying the word on her worry like a dress she did not want. She had heard the noise. It was not that, but mechanics speak Latin when fear is on sale. Kojo called to his apprentice, a boy who had perfected the art of appearing smaller than a spanner. "Bring diagnostic," he said. The boy returned with a stethoscope, attached to a hanger. Kojo placed it on the bonnet and nodded sadly. Bottom end. We must overhaul. 15,000. Miriam's rent blinked in her mind and tried to faint. "Overhaul?" she asked, voice small but not yet surrendered. "But the noise started yesterday." "Yesterday is when you heard the confession," Kojo replied. "The sin started long ago." He sniffed, an expert attending a patient who only needed water. "Also, your cha pads are on holiday, your cha shocksam are telling jokes, and your gab battery chat is a politician." He delivered the last sentence with joy. He loved to mix diagnosis with insult. Miriam looked at the yard. Men were busy tightening, loosening, arguing with metal. Auntie Efwatsay, who sold Kelaweel and advice, watched him with a face that kept receipts. A sign on the shack read, "Free check, pay to fix," which in some dialects means pay to breathe. She turned back. "Please test," she said, properly. Kojo grinned. "Do you have computer?" "This yard has human computer." He tapped his head as if it contained a manual that did not leak. Overhaul. He scribbled a quote on a grease-stained pad. Overhaul 15,000, pads 2,400, shocks 6,000, battery 1 to 200, diagnostic 800 DARS. At the bottom, storage fee 200 day. If she hesitated, hostage-taking written as hospitality. Miriam's throat tightened. She thought of Kwaku's school letter asking for little contribution that behaved like big. She thought of Afia's shoes with the talking sole. She thought of her own mother's proverb. When you cannot lift the calabash, lift the phone. She lifted her phone and dialed Auntie Efua, who was 10 meters away. "Auntie," she whispered, "is this the road?" Auntie wiped plantain oil from her fingers and walked over slow like a detective who prefers facts to speed. "Open the bonnet," she told Kojo. He bristled. She smiled the way markets smile when rain respects umbrellas. He opened it with a flourish. Inside, a serpentine belt glazed and singing, a battery with terminals corroded green like jealousy, an alternator that bore the look of a worker demanding union rates. She tapped the belt with a stick. It answered in squeal. She turned the key. The engine stumbled, caught, idled like a drunk uncle who wanted to be decent, but had forgotten the rhythm. The twine battery light offered commentary. "Overhaul?" Auntie asked the air. The air declined the invitation. "Where is Master Adwa?" she said aloud. "Who?" Kojo said, voice balancing arrogance on tiptoes. "Madam Spanner," Auntie replied. "The one who taught Bolt's manners. She said she would pass today." Kojo rolled his eyes. Men with shaky stools dislike carpenters. "We are enough," he said, waving his arms at his own echo. "We are yard." As if the ground had overheard and refused to be misrepresented, a silver pickup pulled in, quiet as consequence. A woman stepped out, coveralls tied at the waist, t-shirt that said, "Talk is a promise," hair wrapped in a scarf that had seen more sun than salon. She carried a tool bag, without apology. The bag clinked like intelligent conversation. A murmur moved through the yard. Madam Spanner. Boys stood taller. Men adjusted their trousers as if respect were a belt. Kojo attempted a grin and landed on a cough. "Sister Adwoa," he called, "you arrived to see us do wonders." She shook his hand the way elders shake a bottle, gently to see what floats. "What is the patient's first name?" she asked the car, not him. "Bluebird?" She listened. "Bluebird, what are you failing to tell the man who does not ask the right question?" Miriam stepped forward. "Please," she said, "I came for a belt noise and battery light. He says overhaul. I have half a rent." She said it as if confessing a minor theft to a forgiving priest. Adwa nodded. "We will spend woo ears before we spend woo money," she said. To Kojo, "Print me your diagnostic." He waved the grease pad. She raised an eyebrow. "The one with numbers," she said. "Not feelings." He bristled. "We know engines by smell," he said, inhaling loudly and finding only his own perfume. The boys chuckled and stopped when she looked at them. Adwa pulled out her multimeter and fur OBD reader. She clipped the probes to the battery. 12.1 with engine off, she said. "Low. Start." The engine cranked reluctantly and settled. 14.6 at idle. Alternator works. "Revens." The voltage jumped. She nodded, satisfied. She pulled a spray bottle and misted the belt. The squeal shut up like a child reminded of visitors. "Glazed belt," she announced. "Replace belt, tension properly, check idler, clean battery terminals. The rough idle?" She unplugged the EMAF sensor, listened to the engine protest, replugged, tapped vacuum hoses, found one cracked like dry season. "Vacuum leak. Replace hose." Kojo scowled. "Even if small things are wrong, the calm overhaul decal key will free them." Adwa turned to him. Her voice remained calm, but her stare tightened bolts at a distance. "Overhaul is surgery. Do you cut open a man because his nose is blocked? Do you tear down a house because its door or squeaks?" She turned to Miriam. "Estimate, belt 350, Hose 60, terminal clean 40, labor 250, total 700. She wrote it on a clean sheet with a pen that had never lied. The yard inhaled. Kojo's invoice shrank in the heat like an ego near a better story. He tried one last trick. "Madam," he said, finding a smile, "we can do it for her. It weighs 600 pounds. Special." Adwoa shook her head. "We are not here to beat a price. We are here to repair a habit." She turned to Miriam. "Do you authorize—" Miriam's eyes filled with water that had been waiting at the dam. "I authorize," she said, and the word paid some bills inside her chest. Adwoa handed her a reason cardiole from her pocket, laminated, neat. Front: greet, ask, estimate, authorize, repair, return. Back: you will receive old parts back. You will receive readings. You will receive an apology if we are wrong. We don't fix only cars, she said. We fix trust. Work began, not as theatre but as a hymn. Adwoa loosened the tensioner, slipped off the belt with a movement like forgiveness, spun the idler, bearing rough, added it to the list. She called to Auntie Efua. "Send the boy for belt and idler from Kwaku Spares. Tell him Madam Spanner said, don't let the rubber be gossiped." The boy ran like news on market day. While they worked, a small crowd assembled, trotro drivers, teachers on break, a pastor whose collar learned to enjoy engine bays, two mothers who wanted to see how expertise wears gender. Kojo skulked at the edges, trying to become a tree. His apprentice stood near Adwoa, learning that real mastery makes hands quiet. The parts arrived. Belt on, idler changed, hose replaced, terminals brushed until the copper remembered its youth. Adwoa turned the key. The bluebird purred. The battery light bowed out like a bad actor. The idol settled into a humility that had not visited in weeks. She handed Miriam the old parts goose in a bag. "Keep them," she said. "They are your Karin recetas against lies." She filled an ad-after actions card. Work done, parts returned, readings before, after. "This stays in your glove box. If any man tells you all overhauls in the next 6 moons, show him this and ask him for his numbers." Miriam exhaled, the kind of breath that buys bread. She reached for her purse. "Please, I want to pay extra for the lesson." Adwoa shook her head. "Pay the right price, Max, and tell 10 people," she said. "That is how the city changes its oil." She looked at Kojo. "You," she said, not unkindly. "Bring your receipts." He attempted a smirk. It died from malnutrition. "What receipts?" "For your overhauls, she said. "For the cars that never needed surgery." She nodded at a bench of tires. "Sit. We will build something." Auntie Efua clapped once. The hubcap drum hummed in approval. The yard leaned forward like a congregation when the preacher has finally earned their ears. A tale, let it be told. The bench of wrenches, the oath of honest hands, and the audit that walked by afternoon, the sun bargained with clouds and lost. Shade fell kindly on Ammanfro Motor Yard. A rectangle of plywood appeared. 4 stones arranged themselves into legs, and the yard, by ancient right, declared it a bench. Adwoa Madam Spanner stood behind it, not as a judge but as a pommel carpenter of habits. She placed 3 things on the wood: a wrench with a red strip, a multimeter, and a folded muclothy, symbols, promise, proof, and clean hands. "Bring chairs," Auntie Efuaz commanded. People brought crates, tires, stubbornness made portable. Kojo sat, squirming. His apprentice perched beside him, hoping to borrow a spine. "Today," Adwoa said, "we open the bench of wrenches. This bench punishes no one. It incalibrates everyone. Mechanics who forget will sit. Customers who lie will sit. We will not make this a gender bench. We will make it a truth bench." She picked up the wrench, the red cloth wound near its neck like a chief's reminder. "The guild gave this to me," she said. "They did not give it to me because I have the biggest arms. They gave it because I have the quietest stories. I fix and the car leaves and no one remembers I was there. That is how repairs should be. Today we write a shop oath. She raised the multimeter. Our city does not lack the tools. It lacks your procedures. Tools without procedures are weapons. We will write our procedures in 7 lines, short enough to fit in a pocket and long enough to reach your heart conscience. Selom, a trotro driver with an MBA in common sense, produced a piece of chalk and wrote as she spoke on the yard's wall, which had hosted better graffiti. The 7 bolts of trust. Greet before you lift. Say the car's name if it has one. Ask the owner for the symptom, not the verdict. Measure before you name. Voltage, pressure, codes. Feelings are not data. Estimate in daylight. Write the price before the spanner turns. Authorize with a witness. The owner's yes is a bolt. Tighten it. Apologize faster than the leak. If you misdiagnose, your mouth must arrive before the tow truck. Teach what you can. An informed customer is a jack that lifts everyone. The crowd murmured, a market hum turning into a hymn. Adwa turned to Kojo. Confession is maintenance, she said. Say, what you did, and why. Kojo stared at his boots, which had seen more mud than repentance. He cleared his throat. I sell overhauls. Because overhauls pay like Christmas. I fear small jobs are small joy. I saw a woman and decided rent could sit in her purse for an hour. He lifted his eyes. I have a bum mother. I'm ashamed. Silence stood up, then sat, as if yielding the floor to usefulness. Adwo nodded. Good, she said. Shame is a wrench wand if you know where to hold it. Now we will repair your procedure. She turned to the apprentice. Your name? Parkow the boy whispered. Your eyes are good, Adwoa said. Your hands are frightened, but honest. You will be the first oath. She handed him the red-wrapped wrench. Repeat after me. I will tighten what is loose and loosen what is tight, and leave people better than I met them, he repeated, voice finding trousers. The crowd exhaled pride like steam. She faced the yard. From now, she said, the bench of wrenches will keep a log. Anyone may open it. It will record diagnosis, readings, price, parts returned, signature. It will also record apologies. We will not be a yard where apologies need masks. And as Pastor Keenan raised a hand, watchful not to hijack the mechanic's pulpit. And if customers lie, Adwoa picked up the cloth, wiped the wrench, laid it down. They sit, they write, what was my fear? What did it make me invent? Then we feed them and send them home wiser. Auntie Efwa banged a spoon on a pot. Let us test, she said, already ahead of the plot. She beckoned. Miriam, whose bluebird now purred like a cat that had made peace with the sun. Sister, tell your story. Short, with numbers. Miriam stood and discovered her knees trusted her again. Battery at 12.1, she recited. Alternator 14.6. Belt glazed. Idler rough. Vacuum hose cracked. Terminals corroded. Estimate 700 B. Authorization given. Old parts returned. She held up the bag. They are uglier in person. The yard laughed. Kojo, strangely, laughed too, because relief had found a chair in his chest nobody knew was there. A man in a pressed shirt and a haircut that dreams of radios elbowed forward. I am K-Cow Consumer Protection, he announced, producing an ID that had watched too many movies. We received complaints about Amanfro Motor Yard. Welcome, Adwa said, to your after complaint. She pointed to the wall. Read, he read. He blinked. Bureaucrats do not cry. Their eyes simply become more administrative. This is acceptable, he managed. We will adopt the 7 bolts. We will print them city-wide. Printer benches too, Auntie muttered. Paper does not carry weight. Quay nodded, chastened by Stew wisdom. We will fund 2 benches and a logs in every yard that signs. He looked at Kojo. And for you, sir, Kojo stood, surprising himself. I will sit, he said, moving to the bench without being invited. He pulled the log closer and wrote in block letters. I lied because I was afraid of hunger. I will stop starving people to feed my fear. He signed Kojo Natsuga, handed the pen to Bupakao, tapped the wrench twice as if to check its torque, and exhaled. Men around him shifted, as if their own ribs had found better parking. Adwa turned to Pexia and Miriam. Your car will come back in 2 weeks, she said. Not broken, Sha for education. Bring your children. We will teach them where Batanoised lives and where Atan lies, rent. Miriam smiled a smile that paid small debts to her ancestors. Kwaku will ask about talk, she warned. He asks about everything. We will answer with wrenches and math, Adwa replied. The son moved a chair. Shade followed. The bench absorbed more confessions than wood should without splintering. Silormok brought paint and wrote the proverb across the back in letters thick enough for the illiterate to feel. Honesty is the cheapest part. The Basiovat guild elders Wikritu or Stern arrived at dusk, ears already apprised by the drum's gossip. Old man Foley, whose hands once timed engines by smell and prayer, tapped the bench, then the wrench. We used to fix with the songs, he said. We forgot the verses. He faced Adwa. You have taught us a new chorus. He placed a bead bracelet on her wrist, guild honor, that was also insurance and against despair. Keep your head cool and your talk straight. Saeslmon with grease on her forehead approached, 12 years old, eyes the size of future. Madam, she asked, can I be masters one day? Adwoa crouched to her height. Master is just a stool, she said. Bring your own wood. She pressed the red-wrapped wrench into the girl's hands for 3 seconds and took it back. Feel that? It is weight. It is also balance. Learn both. Night began to walk toward them from the market. Generators tested their sermon voices. The yard prepared to sleep like a house that had learned to lock joy in before locking doors. Miriam climbed into her bluebird. She did not start it. She watched the bench until the letters memorized themselves onto her own ribs. Honesty is the cheapest part. She drove home slow to let the road write thank you notes to her tires. On the way, Kwakudis asked what talk was. She answered with a story about tight lids, gentle strength, and knowing when to stop he. A tale, let it be told. Market Saturday, the return of the trick, and the salute that smelled of grease. 2 Saturdays later. A manfro stretched its back for Mrihi. Market day. Stalls grew like mushrooms after rumour, plantains stacked like applause, spices declaring that noses were also made for memory, tailors arguing with cloth and losing beautifully. At the edge, the motor yard had dressed up, a canopy, the bench of wrenches, polished, a whiteboard that read, free check, pay to fix, pay less to learn. Miriam returned with Kwakus and Afia. Kwaku carried a notebook labeled car science. Afia carried a doll with a missing wheel, which she deemed relevant. Adwoa Madam Spanner greeted them with a wrench at her hip and chalk in her hand. We will start with sound eye, she said. Close your eyes. Tell me where the noise lives. She rattled a jar of bolts at different corners of the bluebird. The children pointed and giggled. Learning wore grease and cheek. On the street, a small drama attempted birth. A new mechanic. Imported rumor said he was Kojo's cousin from a neighboring yard, had set up a pop-up under an umbrella that lied about a beer brand. His sign promised ECU Flash, Performance, Miracle Overhaul today only. He eyed the crowd near the bench of wrenches and decided, marketing needed sabotage. He approached Miriam's bluebird, as if commissioned by fate. Sister, he said, voice that had rehearsed gullibility at home, your idol is uneven. I will reprogram your brain box. 50% discount. If you delay, your pistons will write to the mayor. Miriam smiled the way rivers smile when pebbles audition as boulders. She pointed toward Adwo. My car's brain already went to school, she said, but you can speak to the bench of wrenches. He scoffed. Since when do benches fix cars? Since Praetus began to break them. Auntie Efwa shot back from her Kellerwell fort. The mechanic tried a different strategy. Fear. He tapped a random relay, announced solemnly, "Crank sensor, failing," and held out his hand like a conjurer expecting applause. Kwaku squinted. "How do you know?" he asked, pencil poised to catch either wisdom or comedy. "Experience," the man said, patting his chest. "Also, spirit. Spirits do not read voltage, Choas," Adwa said, appearing the way truth appears when it refused to nap. She offered her multimeter-like hospitality. "Measure," she invited. "If you are right, I will buy you to supper. If you are wrong, you will sit on the abenchinti and by honesty, ko." He bristled. Men do not enjoy exams sprung by women who look like solutions. I am busy," he said, scanning for clients with looser math. "Busy," Auntie Mum translated, "is the cousin of Ginsiu unprepared akata." Laughter salted the air. "The consumer protection bag." Man, Kay had returned for the audit with a new accessory, a clipboard that had learned to behave. He stepped closer. "Measure," he echoed, curious whether the day would choose parable or police. Under an audience knitted from market curiosity, the man reluctantly tested. The Chunkrank sensor smiled at numbers that enjoyed health. He grunted, choosing to be offended by evidence. "The math, then." That, too, read fine. He stabbed at the sky for inspiration. The sky ignored him. "Bench," Adwo said softly. Not a threat, an invitation to physics. He hesitated. Kwaku tugged his sleeve, eyes wide with the innocence that ruins adults. "Please sit so I can see how learning looks." He sat. He wrote in the log sigh, letters trembling like bolts without thread. "I guess to earn. I will measure to deserve." He looked smaller when he stood, and that was a kind of growth. Workshops urihi continued like hymns with multiplicity. Parkow, now apprentice of notes, confidence returning from long leave, demonstrated battery maintenance to a semicircle of trotro drivers who had raped terminals with pliers for years and called the result troubleshooting. He said, "Dab don't flood," like a chef who loves the pan more than the applause. Silorm taught a tire pressure, with a gauge that had learned to be patient with lies about eyeballing. Afia replaced her doll's wheel with a washer and a prayer. Both worked. Lorna, manager from the boutique down Cedar Row, which had once failed and learned to pass, came with a small paper bag. She placed it on the bench. Water for the workers, a quiet tithe to the union of improved people. "Your bench taught us to greet before we count," she told Wadwa. "My returns smell different now. They smell like repeat customers." "Welcome," Wadwa smiled. "Benches are contagious when carved deep." At noon, the Guild of Artisans gathered under the canopy for a small to write. Old Man Foley carried a gourd and a sentence. "We call this Yank the Liar Day," he announced. "Not to yank men, but to yank habits." He poured a little libation onto the bench's foot. "For the ancestors of tools, the nameless hands who kept nations from collapsing out of sheer vibration. Today," he declared, "we clap for a single mom, who authorized her own dignity, for an park apprentice Barry who found his neck, and for a paita master Farton who adds gaskets to the city's heart." He raised a palm. "Also," he added, smiling toward Kojo, who had stayed to his credit and fixed 3 small jobs with unusual neatness, "we nod to sinners who discovered they are not doomed to repeat." The crowd clapped like loose nuts discovering thread. Then Kader from Consumer Protection did something that surprised even his own neck. He stood straight and saluted toward Adwa, not military, civic. The kind of salute that smells faintly of its grease, instead of parade powder. "Madam Master Technician," he said, "on behalf of this city's phones that ring too much with complaints, we salute your real rank. Keeper of honest hands." Cameras, the polite ones, clicked. Adwa returned no salute. She wiped her hands on the cloth and bowed. To the bench, to the yard, to the people who would forget and remember and forget again until memory became policy. And old Peugeot coughed into the yard like a smoker announcing repentance. Its owner, a teacher, with chalk dust as a surname, held an invoice from another shop. Overhaul, prescribed for what looked like fuel starvation. He looked at the bench, looked at Adwatakes and laughed a tired laugh. "Exam me," he said. They measured Iag's pressure. They checked in filters. They tapped a seed relay cause that had retired without telling HR. The Peugeot drank and sang. The teacher sat on the bench from gratitude, not punishment, and wrote a note. "I almost became content. Thank you for kicking me back into curiosity." He tucked it under the seat like a spare generosity. As afternoon folded its heat and the market's gossip changed uniforms for evening, Miriam walked to the bench with Kwaku and Afia. She placed a paper on the wood. Tuition receipt. "Paid," she said softly. "We did not have to choose between school ham and chan overhaul. Bow." The bench understood. Wood has heard worse math. Adwasad breathed out the way pistons breathe in reverse. "Bring me their report cards," she said to Miriam. "If they fail, I will tighten something else. Maybe my sleep." Miriam laughed. "Leap. A group of young women yours in coveralls, faces bright with the oil of new careers, approached carrying a banner hand-painted with care. Girls with talk. They had organized themselves after seeing Kaut, Madam Spanner, at work. "We want apprenticeships," their leader said, voice not asking for permission so much as for a workstation. "We can lift, we can measure, we can also say, sorry, faster than a leak." "Tomorrow 6 a.m., Adwo said, hiding her joy in the pocket where she keeps sockets. "Bring one boots, my do, bring one mouths, that ask, bring one stomachs, for stew, less than perfect." They cheered like bolts finally reaching spec. Dusk arrived with its clipboard. The market packed itself without needing minutes. The bench of wrenches sat, carved proverb, catching the last yellow like a receipt, the sun signs before closing. Kojo approached. Adwa, hat in hand, that had learned to be humble without being small. "Madam," he said, I want to build the second benches at my cousin's yard." He swallowed pride, which was saltier than he remembered. "Teach me." "How?" Adwa put a hand on his shoulder, not heavy. "Start with a plank, she said. Then write a sentence and you don't want to read on a bad day. If it still makes sense when you are hungry, carve it, then sit on it, often." He nodded. "Honesty is the cheapest part," he repeated, testing how it felt against empty pockets. "It makes me full." Night chose to be generous with Breeze. The yard turned the last bolts. Kwaku and Afiatus fell asleep on the Bluebird's back seat, mouths open in the shape of future. Miriam stood under the canopy and counted, not money. Mercies. She found she could count enough to be dangerous tomorrow in a world built by receipts and shortcuts. "Madam," Kay said, lingering with the clipboard that wanted to become a psalm, "how did you become this?" Adwa looked at her hands. They were clean only in the way hands that work can be clean. Slowly, she said, "By losing arguments into evidence, by letting old men teach me, even when their mouths lost time, by letting girls teach me, even when their laughter found mine old, by coming back when bolts broke, by never calling theft hustle." She shrugged, "and by having a mother who said, 'When your name is mentioned, let tools smile.'" He wrote, "Let tools smile." The city needed that on a billboard more than it needed itself on television. Auntie Efua banged her pot one last time. "Yard is closing," she declared. "Those who owe you apologies do pay now. Those who owe you thanks do pay with your water source for the bench." People laughed, and then actually brought water. The bench drank it the way wood drinks, slowly, like a lesson. Before me, Miriam drove away. Adwa lifted a hand in the kind of salute that lives in workshops, 2 fingers greasy, small arc, big meaning. Miriam returned it with a hand on her heart. No ribbons, no rum, just recognition that the day had tightened something beyond bolts. A tale. A tale. Let it be told. The telling is finished. The wrenches yard will continue the work. If you reached here, leave your footprint for the drum. Like, so the bench stays oiled. Shares with someone who runs a shop, and comment, your sis city plus time, so the next folktale finds your yard before the next fake overhaul does.